Welcome to Face Forward, the podcast, the series that takes you behind the scenes of the riveting world of clinical trial management. I am your host, Valerie Coveney, and I am thrilled to be your guide on this journey through the nuances of planning, executing, and navigating the clinical research landscape. Welcome to the last part of our discussion on sites with guests Ted Trafford and Brad Hightower. Last episode, we talked about the impacts of protocol errors and inconsistencies on sites and recruitment. For this third and final segment, we are diving into a sensitive subject, holdback and payments. So we kind of touched on the subject a bit earlier on the first segment. Brad, what could you share with our listeners on that topic?
Yeah, and anyone who doesn't know, oftentimes a component of the contracts between a site and a sponsor, site and CRO, is that they hold a certain percentage of money from each visit, which gets paid after closeout. So essentially, I guess, I don't know, maybe sponsors think that we're going to hold data hostage or, I'm still not quite entirely sure of the intent or origin of the holdback, but you're oftentimes, seeing sponsors or CROs try to hold back I've seen as much as 20% that they want to hold. And we already know the stories about how sites run off, they're not heavily resourced. We're fighting to keep good staff, hire talented staff. So to hold back 20% of revenue from a site, it could be, it can destroy the ability for a site to, do their jobs correctly. I will say, and Ted, you can tell me if this is your experience, I think it's getting better. Yep. We have been able to more often successfully negotiate that out of our contracts. But it kind of goes back to the original thing. Like, it feels like a trust issue, right? And that a site's not being valued as a partner. And in fact, they're being, almost seen as somebody that we're not sure if we can trust them. So we're going to keep some of the money back just in case they decide to not give us all the data we want, or we need some leverage over them in some way.
And sorry to interrupt, Brad. I just, one of the things you didn't say is that, we're doing studies that are going on for years. We might be 5-10 years on a particular study. And if you're holding 20% to the end of that 5 years, that's significant.
Yeah, that can be hundreds of thousands of dollars at times. And again, that can make a big difference in a site's ability to, it can make a big difference in the ability for them to keep their doors open.
Yeah.
If you look at some of the industry surveys out there, how many sites operate off of less than like 3 months of operating income. So again, that can make a significant difference. So we're kneecapping some of our sites out there, or even if that's not the case, sites that could grow and do more and better. So again, I think that's very short-sighted strategy on the CRO sponsor side.
And the practical impact that it has on a study is, let's say there's a situation where the site has their staff, they're phenomenal staff, they're doing a great job on the study. The site ownership may delay adding staff when they really need to, because things are so tight financially, and they may hold off too long. And then it can lead to, quality issues at a site because the coordinator's overworked, or two, it really, to your point, it stymies them of being able to recruit even more in a clinical trial that maybe they could do really well. And but they just don't have the resources, and they've just got to wait until they start getting the payments. Because the other side of this is that the payment frequency is something that needs to be addressed. Even though things I think are starting to get better, there's still situations that from the time you see a participant in a clinical trial until you actually receive the funds for that visit, it could be 6 months to a year. And that just needs to get fixed. And we frequently are having problems when either sponsors or CROs change their payment systems. And all of a sudden, you don't get anything until they fix all the problems with their new payment system. And meanwhile, the site's trying to figure out how to pay their bills every day.
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember how recently it was. But yeah, we had a startup invoice that didn't get paid for 14 months. I mean, there
Wow.
are things that are, it's mind-boggling. And again, I don't know if there's some perception that sites aren't businesses like everyone else is.
Mm.
I often feel like sites are sort of expected to be like, oh, you guys are just doing it for the good of doing it. And not that we aren't, but in order to do that, we need to be able to pay employees to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, I feel like that's so, I know it's talked about a lot, but I still don't think it's given the sort of oomph that it should. That I
Yeah.
think if you want the ecosystem to be healthy, you need sites to be healthy and
Mm.
not just
That's right.
scraping by, but healthy. And I guarantee you, if sites are healthy, they will do more and they will expand and they'll be able to provide better services to the sponsors. And again, I feel like it's very sort of short-sighted that we're not, putting a little bit more, I don't know, more resources or at least more attention on that.
You know what I had happen the other day, and this was really cool. And this maybe is an incredibly good sign that sponsors are starting to think about things in a different way. Is they reached out to a site that had done feasibility and wasn't selected for the study, and they said, "We want to pay you for, here's an amount that we're going to pay you for completing the feasibility questionnaire, meeting with us at the pre-study visit, and reviewing all the documentation." It wasn't a lot, but it was something. It was a recognition that
Mm.
this this takes time, effort, and money to do these things, and sites aren't getting compensated for it. So that was really encouraging, and immediately that sponsors, vaulted up a few points when it comes to saying, "Hey, this is somebody we want to work with again in the future." Because yeah, we'll do their paperwork and feasibility. We'll get it back to them as soon as we can.
Yeah, we had a somewhat similar situation, a very small biotech. We had done a study with them very successfully. They had another one. We were coming in late. We had actually gotten all of the startup done. We were about to schedule SIV, and they're like, "Hey guys, sorry, this thing filled up faster than we thought." Well, according to the contract, we actually weren't eligible to receive those startup funds. But they're like, "Listen,
Right.
we're gonna cut you guys. Again, not all of it, but a good enough portion that I was like, amazing. Most of the
Yeah.
time, this would not be the case. And again, to go back to sort of the original point and sort of overarching theme here, I know before we taped this, we talked a lot about the concept of like sponsor of choice, right? Like
Yeah.
that's the kinds of things that are going to make it's going to make us work harder for you as a sponsor. If you treat the sites as a partner and sort of make those concessions sometimes, yeah, I'm sure it's a pain for them, but I think the longer term payoff is going to outweigh the few $1,000s you may spend, making a site feel whole for the work that they've done.
Yeah, and we're now encountering sponsors that are paying sites monthly based on the data that's entered into the EDC. And I mean, if you're a sponsor who wants their data in fast, that's the way to get it fast. is is to say, yeah, we're going to pay you regularly, and we're going to pay it based on the data that's in EDC, not the fully monitored data, because we know that's going to get corrected and worked out in the end. And yeah, so there are some cool things happening when it comes to site finances.
Yeah, it wasn't long ago and it was, 10% holdback quarterly payments. Those seem to be the, sort of norm of what you saw. I do think we're seeing less and less of that. Monthly payments are becoming a lot more prevalent, which
Yeah.
I'm happy to see. And yeah, to your point, and even at those quarterly payments, if something's not perfect, they weren't paying you for it. So now you're waiting an extra quarter to
Mm.
possibly get paid. But yeah, I do think maybe hopefully sponsors are catching on that that's a pretty simple way to align incentives. We want our data quick. Well, best way to
Yep.
do it is tie that payment to getting that data in quick. But make that uh, put that in the site's court. They're going to take care of it.
Yeah. The one troubling thing for me that we've seen that seems to be increasing is an increase in the number of items that sites have to invoice for. So one, pass-through costs, but then other things that are like, you know, conditional procedures or something like that. And those seem to be escalating. And I don't think there's an appreciation of how much time it takes to track those things and invoice them and chase the money down. So yeah, I wish there was a way that was dealt with a little better.
Yeah, I think if you want to be on a site's good side, don't make them work to chase down the money they already earned.
Right.
Mm.
I mean, that's just it. Like, we've already earned that money. Why are so many things sort of outside the normal payment trigger process, especially when they go in EDC anyway? Those are the ones that, the conditional procedures. If I put something in an EDC, it's there the same way all the rest of the visits are.
Yeah.
I don't understand. Maybe there's some technical components to that make it harder to do, but I can't tell you how often it feels like you're being put in a position to, like, maybe they'll miss it. Maybe we don't have to pay them for it. But then beyond that, every sponsor or CRO you work with has a different process for doing that, whether it be an email box or a portal. If I send an email to some random, payments at sponsor.com, it's just gone in the ether. I don't know if they got it. I don't know if they're processing it. Sometimes you might hear 3 months later, oh, this is rejected. So again, that feels like a very black box sort of process at times. So I'd love to see that be a more transparent. If you're going to make sites do that, at least make it transparent.
Yeah. Mm. Yeah. One of the other cool things that I think all sponsors should adopt is having an item in the budget for like a contingency. So you've got a set amount that is just worked into the budget. It's not earned by the site unless there's something that the sponsor agrees to that is a need. And by having something like that in a study budget, it can make things really quick. If an issue needs to be addressed or the site wants more advertising funding, you don't have to do an amendment to the budget and wait for weeks or months to get that through. It just needs written approval from the appropriate person at the sponsor to say, yeah, we understand this is a new request, a new need. Just do it, invoice us under this part of the study budget. So that's an encouraging thing that's happening right now.
Yeah, I have not seen that, because we had an example recently where a protocol amendment added 3 visits to the protocol. Well, guess what? There was no budget amendment. So we're getting up to being time to do those visits, and we have no budget that those are going to be paid, which again just boggles my mind. This is a big time sponsor that everyone would know. Sometimes you guys know better, but again, you're putting sites in a position to have to scramble and figure out what to do. Which having something built in would make sense. So yeah, that's good. I'm glad you're seeing that. Not something I've seen yet, but hopefully that's becomes a little bit more of the norm.
Yeah, hopefully. The other thing I'd like to see be gotten rid of is payments for only some of the screen failures in a study, because the work is real, and to get a candidate to the point where they're willing to come in for a screening visit and they don't qualify for whatever reason, I really don't think most sites are just trying to bring in as many people as humanly possible to get a screen failure payment when they're not legitimate. Like, they got better things to do than that. And we do have some sponsors where it's a policy that they'll pay for everything that was done for all participants or candidates that were screened, whether they're screen failures or not. And that's amazing. And again, it goes to that sponsor choice. Like, that sponsor pays me for what I do. We love working with them. Come on back.
Right. It's also another one of those demotivating factors. If you if you have a 5-to-1 screen fail ratio, you bring 5 people in, they fail because of especially stuff you can't control, like a laboratory value or an e-diary that didn't get met, which you could not have known retrospectively. Okay, we just did 5. We're not going to get paid.
Right.
So now what do you think is likely to happen is that, okay, well, our cost benefit on this is we're taking a bath. We're going to move on to a study that's paying us for the work that we do. So again, I think sometimes not always immediately understood, but do understand these conversations are happening at sites around your protocols. And, sites have to be strategic because they're oftentimes lean. And, we can't afford to spend all of our time pre-screening, thousands of patients to bring in 6 and they all screen fail and all that. Again, we don't get paid for any of that work, only if they make it, to randomization in many cases.
Yeah. And sponsors need to know that when sites get together at conferences or investigator meetings, they talk about which sponsors they like working with and who they don't like working with and what's a pain and what's great. And I mean, they're people, they normally do that. And so the sponsors that aren't treating sites as partners, that information gets around, and then sites might be hesitant to take on projects. So it's really important, I think, to approach sites in the way that you'd want to be treated if you were asked to do something. It's as simple as that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And it's microcosm of being at a site too. Like, you can't treat your employees like garbage or they'll quit. They'll go find another job, just like sites will find another job, so to speak. If you're up against working with a sponsor that doesn't value your time appropriately or makes your life more difficult than it needs to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really appreciate you guys sharing all this insight. I really like the perspective you're bringing to the podcast. And even from our standpoint as a CRO, I think I'm learning a lot of, things that weren't named in that perspective. And I really appreciate learning about this today. And I think it's going to go a long way. And I'm sure we're at least helping the situation by talking about it, promoting the reality of sites. And yeah, I just hope it's going to further the cause a bit more after today,
Us too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Valerie. This has been great. Brad,
Yeah.
always great to see you and talk to you. Appreciate your insight on things. And Valerie, I hope that we can get a few points across to sponsors and CROs out there. And I appreciate you giving us this format to be able to talk about some of these issues.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for being part of this. And thank you to our listeners as well who were part of this podcast. And we'll see you next time.
As we conclude another illuminating episode of Face Forward, we find ourselves at the crossroads of science and progress. Remember that behind the jargon and statistics lie stories of unwavering commitment, meticulous observation, and the pursuit of evidence that shapes our understanding of health and disease. Stay at the forefront of knowledge and innovation and follow Face Forward on your preferred platform. My name is Valerie Kovney. Thank you for joining us. Until next time.